So, travel is expensive. And of course, we're always looking for ways that we can make it a little bit more affordable. But especially as landscape photographers, if we're not careful, cheaping out on certain flight reservations or particular hotels or locations, it's going to get us in trouble because we're not going to get as great of photos, or we're just going to be exhausted and not have the willpower to do what we ought to do. So, how can you save money on the reservations for your next landscape photography trip without compromising on the quality of the trip? That's what we're going to focus on in this episode. And the first tip to start off with is, of course, with the flight. Now, here's the catch. Most people think of the flight as the first place to try to save money. But the truth is, over a 3 to 4 week trip, maybe even a 2-week trip, the cost of the flight is dwarfed by the hotels. So if you can save in any area, don't worry about the flight. Go for the hotels, figure out ways you can save on accommodations, because that recurring every night charge is where you spend your money. That said, flights are expensive, but the good news is typically if you have some time on your hands and you have some flexibility, you should be able to get a flight to most of the major European destinations for $600 or under. So if you're spending $1,000 or so on your flight, you're probably paying too much. Now, how do you find these deals? Well, you have to have some flexibility. So start out by deciding, okay, how long you want your trip to be, and then figure out what is the shortest trip you're willing to do and what's the longest trip you're willing to do. So for example, if I wanted to do a 3-week trip to Zurich, Switzerland, I'd probably start looking for a flight that was anywhere between 2.5 and 3.5 weeks. That way I have some flexibility for day of the week, because throughout the week, flight prices can fluctuate quite a bit. The other thing is to have flexible departure dates. This one is harder, and depending on your job, you may not be able to get approval soon enough. So this depends on your job. But what I like to do is I try to have a flexible duration of about 30 days and then decide, okay, would I be willing to snag a flight if it landed between July the 1st and then the 1st of August, anywhere in there for my departure day. So once you have a trip duration and departure date, now it's time to start watching for the flights. Bunch of different flights for this. I've linked to a post down in the description that goes into a lot of detail about a lot of the popular search engines. The TLDR is none of them are perfect, but between all of them, you can cover a lot of budget airlines, a lot of the good airlines, but you need some flexibility for some of these options. My favorite place to get travel deals is secretflying.com. They have an email newsletter, and so I get emailed every day about the latest deals, in particular from Atlanta, which is my hub, to pretty much anywhere in the world. And so I keep an eye on that and decide if maybe I want to book something last minute. It's harder when you're trying to book a particular flight and particular destination. You can still do it, but you're not going to save nearly as much. You may not get under that $600 mark. Once you've got the flight booked, and you should always make that the first thing, when you go to book the rental car, and yes, you should book a rental car if you're doing landscape photography, you might think you can get everywhere you need with public transportation, but if you're looking for some really cool off-the-grid landscape photography spots, you need to rent a car. I've linked to another post that goes into more detail why that ought to be the case. Well, anyway, car rentals are the most lucrative part of anything you'll ever book for travel. For whatever reason, it can vary by as much as a factor of 4 times, depending on when you book. So typically, right after the flight, I go book a car rental immediately afterwards. And then what I start doing is I check 1 to 2 times every week, see if the rates have dropped. If you book it through Expedia or Priceline or a few of these other travel booking sites, you don't even have to enter a credit card number, which means you get free cancellation. So I go ahead and make a reservation just in case that is the best price I'll get, and then I check it every week or two. And once we get to the last week, I check it every day. Sometimes I've had the price drop 50% by booking the day before I arrive. There are some automated sites that do this sort of thing. I'm a little bit old-fashioned, but again, more descriptions in the post. Number 3, when you go to book accommodations, be careful about trying to book through Priceline or booking through Airbnb and these other places, because the reviews aren't always that reliable. My favorite place to go is booking.com. In my experience, they tend to curate the best reviews, and they've been really reliable. They have a really good search engine as well. This is not a promo piece for them, but I've had really good success with booking. I've never had any problems, and I've been traveling for 5 years now using their site. Airbnb is my fallback if there's not a good spot, if there's not a good accommodation in the region I'm going to, but beware of the overwhelming positivity bias that comes with a lot of Airbnb reviews. Because Airbnb reviews go both ways, the host reviews you as a guest, guests tend to be a little bit less honest in the reviews. And so typically I have to read all of the reviews with a fine-tooth comb, because oftentimes the places that have 5-star reviews are places I would probably give 3, but I feel obligated to give a 5. So be careful booking Airbnb. That said, I've had some great experiences at Airbnbs. It's just not usually my first pick when I'm researching. 4, check your credit card benefits. Your credit card can save you a lot of money and a lot of hassle. So one in particular is, are you paying a 3% foreign transaction fee? That's a common one. And if you've had even decent credit, you can usually get a credit card that won't charge you a foreign transaction fee. I have a Capital One Quicksilver, and I don't get charged the 3% foreign transaction fee. That's great. When you're overseas, make sure you purchase everything using the local currency. Don't be fooled when you walk into a restaurant or the hotel and they ask if you want to pay in USD. Many of the people running the shops don't realize that you'll get charged a really bad conversion rate. So instead, ask them to charge it in the local currency, and then your credit card's conversion rate will kick in, and it's usually going to be much better, and you probably won't pay a 3% transaction fee if you have the right card. The biggest thing the credit card gives you, however, is the collision damage waiver. Essentially, this is your insurance overseas, your liability, not your liability. You have to have liability at all times, but this covers collision. So if you get in an accident and it's your fault, then the CDW covers that damage, which could be really expensive because rental cars are fairly new most of the time. And normally you have to pay that out of pocket. Normally you buy it and it's something really sketchy. You buy it at the car rental place. But most of the good credit cards already have this as a benefit, but you need to call ahead of your trip and get proof of your collision damage waiver, because many of the car rental places will have very fast-talking salespeople who will tell you you have to buy their insurance. So you need to have written proof that your card will cover collision in case of damage. The last thing to be aware of is that it's not insurance. And this hit me last year when I was in my first overseas accident. And unfortunately, a car was totaled. And so I got slammed directly by the rental company with a 2,000 euro deductible. It's a lot of money. And it did not go through insurance or anything. It came out of my credit card bill immediately. And it took me 9 months to get proof and documentation from the rental car company to get it reimbursed. So CDW is a reimbursement benefit in a lot of cases, not insurance. That said, over the years, it's saved me so much in not having to purchase car insurance when I travel overseas that it was totally worth it, even though it did take a long time and I was out $100 or so for foreign transaction fees. Well, if I'd used the other credit card, I wouldn't have even lost that. So TLDR, take advantage of your collision damage waiver and talk to your credit card company directly to learn all the details, so that way you don't get taken in by these fast-talking salesmen. And 5, steer clear of the travel agencies unless you have one that you really respect. I used to sign up for deals from TravelZoo, and there were some European overseas travel agencies. They're nice in that they add another layer of customer support, which has helped. One time when I had a flight with Turkish Airlines, they changed the dates last minute. I called the representatives and couldn't understand them. Thankfully, I was able to go to Expedia, and they were able to get everything fixed for me. Their customer support was fantastic. But if you go through other travel agencies, you're not guaranteed that experience. And most of the time, you lock yourselves into their options. So you may have a different hotel you want to go to. Well, it's not in their list of deals. So you probably won't save money by the time you customize your destination, your departure date, and how long your trip is. I've tried it a couple times, and in practice, I could have booked a little bit cheaper booking on myself, and I would have had the flexibility while I was over there to switch up reservations. So those are my 5 tips for how you can save money when you're getting bookings reserved for your next photography trip. Hope those help you. Make sure to tune in next time for more digital nomad tips and landscape photography tutorials.